this is the next section of the text, lines 34 to 47. I'm going to scroll through the PowerPoint, pause as you need to make notes or to check that your translation is correct. Okay, so let's have a think about some analysis. I think the first thing to point out is that the Ethiopian king remains nameless. Here he's just Aithops, in contrast with Cambyses, who obviously has a name. And we learn instantly that the Ethiopian king, Mathon Hoti Katoptai Herkoyen, having learned or having found out that they have come as spies, how does he find that out? And what impression of his character is Herodotus creating here by telling us that he's found this out so quickly? Similarly, when he says katoptai herkoyen, the word katoptai, spies, is placed before the verb they'd come. And so Herodotus is really putting the emphasis on how the Ethiopian king discovers the truth of the matter. So after all that build-up about this pretext that Cambyses was sending them on, and the kind of deceit that he was trying to employ, as soon as they arrive, Mathon Hoti Katoptai, the Ethiopian king figures out that they're spies. Again, what impression is being created of him compared with Cambyses? So he addresses them, and here Herodotus uses something called anaphora, which is where you repeat the same word or phrase at the beginning of successive clauses. So ute, 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 all meaning neither. And notice that there's 3 of them. That's a tricolon. So this is an anaphoric tricolon. And what does he say in this tricolon then? So first of all, he says the Persian king hasn't sent you carrying gifts because he wants to be my friend or to be my ally. And notice how he echoes almost exactly the words that the spies had used. So he's literally throwing Cambyses' words back in his face. I recognise that this is not true, and that ute at the start, really emphatic. Then he says, nor do you speak the truth. So the word you crops up twice here. He says, the Persian king didn't send you, and you don't speak the truth. So notice how the spies don't get off lightly here either. In that first clause, they're the object, okay, so they're doing what Cambyses has told them to, he sent you. But in the second bit, the Ethiopian king is accusing them directly as well. He's saying, you do not speak the truth. So they're the object, humas, they're also the subject, humes, and so they're coming in for criticism as well as Cambyses. He then repeats what it is that he's learned. Herkate gar katoptai tes ms archais, you have come as spies. And again, by spelling it out to them so explicitly, he's showing that he's figured out Cambyses' ruse, and that that he sees right through him. Of my kingdom, ermes arches. Remember that pronouns in Greek are pretty much optional, so when they're there for emphasis. Again, the Ethiopian king is really trying to stress how outraged he is by the behaviour of Cambyses and the spies, that they would come to his own kingdom to try and spy on him. And finally, he says, and this is, saving the best till last, ute ekenos anna, nor is that man obviously referring to Cambyses. I mean, that's a pretty dismissive, a pretty derogatory way to refer to the king of the Persians, that man. So I think he's showing quite clearly what he thinks about Cambyses here. And then the very last word, dikaios, obviously it's left to last, it's probably emphatic. This is quite a criticism to make. That man is not just. And justice, certainly to the Greeks, so to Herodotus and his audience, is a really important concept. And the idea that a ruler would not be just or would not have justice is pretty shocking, really. Okay, then he goes on and he says, for if he were just, and this if at the start makes it quite clear that he doesn't think Cambyses is just, then he wouldn't have desired my land and he wouldn't have tried to make us slaves. And again, ut an, this is an example of anaphora. So emphasising Cambyses' shameful acts. Look at this, the ales ertes heautu, he wouldn't have desired a land other than his own. I think there's a real contrast here with the ermes arches in the previous slide. So where the Ethiopian king is satisfied with his own kingdom, Cambyses is really kind of grasping and greedy. He wants another one that isn't his own. So the Ethiopian king is criticising Cambyses there for his ambition. And he accuses him of wanting to enslave the Ethiopians. Now, obviously, this idea of enslaving somebody carries very negative connotations. And this is Herodotus playing on Greek ideas of what the Persians were like. So the Greeks thought that all of the Persians were basically slaves of their king. And more than that, that they were kind of happy to be so. So the Ethiopian king is actually quite Greek in the way that he comes across here, you might say. He recognises the fact that Cambyses' desire is to enslave people and that the Persian way of being is to be in slavery. And then he says that Cambyses wants to enslave people by whom he hasn't been wronged uden, like in any way at all. So there's a bit of a contrast or a parallel, I suppose, between dikaios up here and then erdikatai down here. Cambyses isn't just, and in fact he's even worse because he's wronging people who haven't wronged him. And then finally in this section, Herodotus introduces toxon tode. What is this toxon? Where has it come from? And if you look at the word order in the Greek, so, but now, to him, this bow giving, these words speak. So the bow sort of appears out of nowhere before we find out what the spies are supposed to do with it. And it's Herodotus creating quite a visual, quite a vivid picture for us. You can almost imagine the Ethiopian king sort of pulling out the bow with a flourish and presenting it to the spies. So in this section, the Ethiopian king asserts his status, I suppose, over Cambyses. Look at the word order of the first section here. He says, Basileus ho Aethiopon, Symbulue advises toi person Basilei. This structure is called a chiasmus. If we were going to label it, we could do so like this. So this word Basileus parallels, matches up with Basilei. Label those both A. Aethiopon of the Ethiopians matches up with Person of the Persians, and then the hinge, the fulcrum, if you like, of the whole thing is Symbulue up here. So you get this nice kind of balanced word order, A, B, C, B, A. What's the Persian king, or what's Herodotus doing with this chiasmus? Well, he might be showing the equality, again, between the Ethiopian king and the Persian king, that the Ethiopian king feels that he's on a level with Cambyses. Or is it perhaps a suggestion of a shift in power? So notice that the Ethiopian king is the subject here, Basileus, and the Persian king is an indirect object, Basilei. Okay, he gives advice to the Persian king, so now he's the person who's got the power. And he says, I advise you to make war against the Ethiopians, but not just the Ethiopians, the Macrobius Ethiopians. this is how they were referred to by Herodotus right at the start. Why is the Ethiopian king using this description, this epithet, to describe his own people? Is it a reminder to Cambyses that, we'll still be here, we'll wait for you, as long as it takes you to string this bow, we're long-lived, we'll still be here waiting for you? Is it just a statement of superiority? We're really long-lived, you'll never be able to defeat us. And he says, make war on us when you can draw this bow. Hutus, Eupatus, just as easily as this. And again, this is Herodotus creating quite a vivid picture. We need to imagine the Ethiopian king picking up the bow in front of the spies and drawing it back for them and showing just how powerful he is. And that comes up again in this idea of megathe, so a reminder of megathos. Remember, Herodotus used that word earlier to talk about how the Ethiopians choose their king. So the Ethiopian king is reminding us of just how big and impressive and grand he is. I'm so huge that I can draw this huge bow easily like it's nothing. Bet you can't do that, Persians. Finally then, again, Herodotus is creating quite a positive impression, I think, of the Ethiopian king, because the Ethiopian king says, until you can do that, I advise you to be grateful to the gods, to show charis to the gods. This is an expression of piety, almost. Again, a quality that the Greek audience would have valued. And so the Ethiopian king is advising the Persian king to show piety. And he says, be grateful because the gods aren't making us think about attacking a land or acquiring a land other than our own. And again, look at the words that he uses, gen, elen, te, heauton, almost exactly echoing what he said earlier about Cambyses desiring a land other than his own. And so there's a contrast again between the bad behaviour of Cambyses wanting something that isn't his and the piety and the restraint of the Ethiopians who don't desire something that isn't theirs. So he finishes speaking, he unstrings the bow, anes totoxon, and he hands it over, tois herkusi. And this is the final way that the spies are referred to in this section. So they've stopped being spies now, they've just become those who have come. And this really symbolises the failure of their and therefore Cambyses' mission, that they went as spies. Herodotus has referred to them as katoptai all the way through this passage, but now right at the end, they're just the people who had come. So their mission's a total failure, they've lost their purpose, and they're going to have to slink away, you assume, back to Cambyses to report that the pretext didn't work, the Ethiopian king saw straight through them, and more than that, he's actually kind of threatened them as well.